I paid for my son's entire wedding, the venue, the food, even the house he and his new wife were supposed to start their life in. I was proud, dressed in the same gray suit I wore when I married his mother. But when I reached the entrance of that beautiful garden, the security guard stopped me and said, "Sorry, sir, your name isn't on the list." I thought it was a joke. I even laughed, told him, "I'm the groom's father," but his face stayed blank. Guests walked by, smiling politely as if I was some uninvited stranger. My heart sank. My son was inside, promising forever to the woman he loved, and I wasn't even allowed to see it. My name is George Miller. I'm 67 years old, and I spent my whole life working with my hands, building furniture, and raising my boy after his mother passed away. I thought I'd done everything right, but that day, standing outside the wedding I paid for, I realized how wrong I'd been about what love and gratitude really mean. Stay till the end of this story, because it's not just about a wedding. It's about what happens when a parent gives everything and gets shut out of their own child's life. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. I wasn't born rich, but I was born determined. My father taught me that a man's word and his work are his legacy. When I met my wife, Martha, I was a young carpenter with big dreams and rough hands. She didn't care that we lived in a one-bedroom apartment. She used to say, "George, a home isn't about how big it is, it's about who's inside it." When our son Ryan was born, we felt like the luckiest people in the world. Martha stayed home with him while I worked long hours building cabinets and repairing porches. Every nail I hammered, every splinter I pulled from my fingers, it was for Ryan. When Martha got sick, everything changed. Cancer took her slowly, and the last thing she ever said to me was, "Promise me you'll always be there for Ryan." I promised her, holding her hand until her last breath. From that day forward, my world shrank down to one purpose: raising our boy right. Ryan was smart, kind, and always had that spark in his eyes. Even as a teenager, he'd tell me, "One day, Dad, I'll buy you a house by the lake." I didn't need a house. I just wanted to see him happy. When he graduated college, I cried harder than I had since Martha's funeral. He was the first in our family to earn a degree. I gave him the savings I'd put away for retirement and said, "Go start your life. Build something beautiful." Then, he met Olivia, a charming young woman from a well-to-do family. She was polite and sweet when we first met, but I could tell she came from a different world. She'd wrinkle her nose at my old truck or laugh politely at my small house. Still, Ryan loved her, and that was enough for me. When they announced their engagement, I told him I wanted to handle everything: the venue, the catering, the house. He protested, but I insisted. A father's job, I told him, is to make sure his child starts life without burdens. He hugged me tight and said, "You're the best, Dad." I remember spending nights comparing wedding packages, even calling vendors I couldn't afford just to make it perfect. When Olivia mentioned she dreamed of a lakeside ceremony, I made it happen. I even bought them a small room near the water, something Martha would have loved. Every check I wrote felt like a step closer to honoring her memory. I imagined sitting in the front row, watching Ryan smile as he said his vows. I pictured myself giving a toast, telling everyone how proud I was of my boy. For weeks, that image kept me going, but I had no idea that on the day of the wedding, the day meant to bring our family together, I'd be standing outside the gate, holding a gift no one would ever open. The morning of the wedding felt like a dream. The sky was clear, the air smelled of spring, and I could almost feel Martha beside me, smiling the way she used to when Ryan wished something big. I woke up early, ironed my old gray suit, and polished the black shoes I'd worn to her funeral. They weren't new, but they were clean, and they carried the weight of every step I'd taken in my family. Before leaving the house, I looked at Martha's photo on the mantel and whispered, "We did it, honey. Our boy's getting married." I picked up the wedding gift, a framed picture of Ryan sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. He was 6. His smile and could light up the world. I wanted him to see it on his wedding night and remember where he came from. The venue was about 40 minutes away, a beautiful lakeside garden with white tents, chandeliers, and music drifting across the water. I'd spent nearly all my savings securing it. As I drove down the long road lined with oak trees, I felt proud. I thought about what I'd say in my toast. Proud Martha would have been. How lucky Ryan would have found someone who loved him. My heart was full, my eyes wet. When I reached the entrance, 2 security guards stood by the iron gate. One was checking names on a clipboard, while the other directed cars toward the park. I rolled down my window and said cheerfully, "George Miller, groom's father." The guard nodded politely his list, then looked back at me with a blank expression. "Sorry, sir. I don't see your name here. Are you sure you're on the guest list?" For a moment, I thought I'd heard him wrong. I smiled and said, "Of course I am. My son's the one getting married." He looked again, flipping through several pages, and shook his head. "No George Miller listed, sir. I can't let anyone in who's not on the list." My smile faltered. "Son, there must be a mistake. I paid for this entire wedding." I tried to keep my tone light, but something heavy started to press in my chest. The other guard stepped forward, his tone firm but polite. "I'm sorry, sir, but without clearance from the event coordinator, we can't let anyone through. You can wait here if you'd like." People began arriving, one elegant car after another. Guests in suits and dresses walked past, holding gifts and laughing. A few glanced at me curiously as I stood beside my truck, awkwardly holding my wrapped frame. I waved at a familiar face, Olivia's mother, but she looked away, pretending not to notice me. My pride began to crumble. I could feel my ears burning. I stepped aside and pulled out my phone, calling Ryan. The call rang twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again, and again. Nothing. I texted him, "Son, I'm at the gate. The guards say I'm not on the list. Can you come get me?" I waited, watching the screen, praying for those 3 dots to appear. They never did. The ceremony music began inside, soft piano notes followed by violins. I could hear faint laughter, the kind that used to fill our house on birthdays. I felt the tears start to sting. How could he not notice I wasn't there? I tried calling Olivia next. It rang once before going straight to voicemail. I stared through the iron fence, catching glimpses of guests taking their seats. The garden looked perfect, exactly wanted. Every flower, every ribbon, every light was something I'd paid for. And yet, I wasn't welcome. One of the caterers walked by carrying trays of champagne flutes. She recognized me immediately. "Mr. Miller," she whispered. "What are you doing out? Aren't you supposed to be inside?" I shrugged. "Apparently not." Her eyes softened. "I heard something earlier," she said quietly. "The bride told the planner that you weren't to be admitted without her approval. Said you might get emotional." I froze. Emotional. That was the word she used. As if loving my son too much was something to be ashamed of. I stepped back, my hands trembling. The world around felt smaller, quieter. Inside the gate, people clapped and cheered as the ceremony began. I took a few steps away and found a bench near the parking lot. I sat there, trying to steady my breathing. Every sound, the music, the laughter, the camera clicks, cut through me. I could see just enough through the trees to spot Ryan standing under the floral arch, adjusting his tie nervously. When he smiled at Olivia, I felt both joy and crash together inside me. That was my boy. The boy he cried after his mother died. The boy I'd worked overtime so he could have the best life possible. And now he stood there, promising forever, while his father sat outside and guessed. I pulled out the framed photo and looked at it again. The younger me was smiling wide, my son's arms wrapped around my neck. I whispered to "Picture, we made it, buddy. Even if I'm not inside, I'm here." A sudden cheer erupted from the crowd inside, followed by applause. I knew what it meant. He'd just said, "I do." The moment I'd dreamed of for years was happening, and I wasn't part of it. I pressed my hand over my chest, trying to keep it from breaking. When the music shifted to celebration, I stood up, brushed off my pants, and walked back to my truck. I placed the gift carefully on the passenger seat and sat there for a long while, staring at the gate. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was empty. Before driving away, I whispered to Martha's picture one more time. "I tried my best, love. I really did." Then I started the engine and left the wedding I had built, but was never meant to attend. I didn't drive home right away. I parked in a small clearing overlooking the venue, where the branches of the oak trees framed the edge of the ceremony. From there, I could see flashes of white dresses, hear laughter carried by the wind, and smell the faint sweetness of the flowers I'd paid for. I sat still for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself maybe it was all a mistake. Maybe Ryan didn't know what had happened. Maybe Olivia's family had taken control of everything. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that my son hadn't done this deliberately. The car felt suffocating, so I stepped outside and walked closer to the edge of the trees. The sun was shining on the lake, and the reflection of the guests shimmered across the water like a painting. I could see Ryan standing beneath the archway, holding Olivia's hands. The officiant's voice was faint but steady, the kind of calm tone that fills the air during a ceremony. I caught a glimpse of Ryan's nervous smile, that same crooked smile he had as a kid whenever he tried to hide his excitement. My throat tightened. I wanted to be proud of him, to feel that same joy I'd imagined for months. But standing there in the shadows, I realized this wasn't my moment anymore. It was theirs, and I had been erased from it completely. A young worker from the catering team passed nearby carrying boxes toward the tent. She recognized me and stopped. "Mr. Miller, what are you doing out here? You should be inside." Her words hit harder than she realized. I forced a smile and said, "I wasn't invited." She frowned. "That can't be true. You're his father." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. She hesitated, then whispered, "I overheard the bride earlier. She said you were too emotional, that you might cause a scene. She told the coordinator not to admit you without her approval." Then she hurried off, leaving me frozen in place. Too emotional. The words echoed in my mind again and again. How could a father's love be something shameful? I wasn't angry at Olivia. Not really. She barely knew me. But Ryan, he knew who I was. He knew what I'd given, what I'd lost, what I'd sacrificed, and still, he stayed silent. I leaned against a tree, watching the ceremony continue. Guests laughed, clapped, and dabbed at their eyes. I could see Olivia's parents sitting proudly in the front row. I wondered if she'd told them who paid for all this. I wondered if Ryan had said anything about the house I bought for them. Maybe he had, or maybe he hadn't. Either way, I didn't belong here anymore. When the vows began, I couldn't help myself. I stepped a little closer, just enough to hear his voice clearly. "I, Ryan, take you, Olivia." His tone was steady, filled with sincerity. I closed my eyes and listened. It was the same voice that once promised me, "Dad, I'll make you proud one day." Now it sounded older, distant, wrapped in a world that no longer included me. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to look away. I wanted to remember this moment, even if it hurt. I wanted to remember my son becoming a husband, even if I wasn't allowed to be part of it. When he said, "I do," a sharp ache went through me like someone had driven a nail through my chest. The applause followed, loud and joyful. People rose to their feet, throwing petals into the air. I stood there, hidden behind the trees, and whispered, "I love you, son." I stayed until the ceremony ended. As the guests began to scatter toward the reception tent, laughter and music filled the air. I saw Ryan and Olivia posing for photographs near the lake, her white dress glowing in the afternoon light. He looked happy. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all a parent could hope for, to see their child happy, even if it came at the cost of their own heart. I walked slowly back to my truck, feeling the gravel crunch under my shoes. My reflection stared back at me from the windshield, an old man with tired eyes and a broken smile. I got in and placed the framed photo on my lap. Ryan's little hands rested on my shoulders in that picture, his face full of trust. I brushed my thumb across the glass and whispered, "You promised me, buddy. You said we'd always be family." For a long time I sat in silence, staring at the wedding from afar. I could hear faint echoes of music, a distant cheer, the start of a new life for my son. I thought about driving down there, walking straight to him, and demanding to know why. But then I imagined the look on his face if Olivia scolded him in front of everyone. I didn't want to be the reason for any scene, not on his wedding day. So I made a choice. I wouldn't beg for a place that was already taken away from me. I wouldn't knock on a door that had been closed by my own son. I would leave with my dignity, even if it meant leaving with an empty heart. Before I started, I took one and whispered, "You'd be proud of him, sweetheart. He's got your smile. I just wish he remembered where it came." Then I turned the key and drove away slowly, watching the venue disappear in the rearview mirror. That drive home felt longer than any road I'd ever traveled. Each mile was heavy, but I kept going, because there's nothing else a father can do when love turns into silence. I didn't hear from Ryan for 2 days after the wedding. The silence was worse than the humiliation. Every hour that passed, I kept waiting for his name to flash on my phone screen. I wanted to hear him say it was a mistake, that he never meant to hurt me, that Olivia or her parents had done something behind his back. I kept glancing at my phone while pretending to read the newspaper, but nothing came. Even the house felt emptier than usual. Martha's photo on the mantel seemed to watch me quietly, like she already knew the truth I was trying not to face. On the third evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, there was a knock on the door. My heart jumped. When I opened it, Ryan was standing there, his head down, still wearing the same wedding ring I'd seen from a distance. He looked uncomfortable, guilty even. "Hey, Dad," he said softly. His voice was small, almost like a boy again. I stood there for a few seconds, unsure if I should hug him or close the door. Finally, I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked into the living room, looking around as if it was his first time seeing the place. I'd cleaned it that morning, hoping he might show up. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. He sat down on the old sofa that used to be his favorite spot when he was a kid. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The ticking clock on the wall would only sound us. "I was going to call you," he said finally, his hands fidgeting. "Things just got hectic." I looked at him steadily. "You got married, right?" "I was there, just not where I was supposed to be." He froze, realizing I'd seen it. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You were there?" "I watched from the parking lot," I said, my tone calm but heavy. "I saw you say, 'I do.' I saw you take the first step into your new life." Ryan's eyes filled with shame. He tried to speak, but couldn't find the words. I sat across from, keeping my composure, though inside my heart was pounding like a drum. "Why, Ryan?" I asked quietly. "Why did I have to stand outside my own son's wedding?" He rubbed his forehead and sighed. "It wasn't my idea, Dad. Olivia didn't want any complications. She said she wanted everything perfect. She thought you might get emotional and, well, embarrass her family." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Embarrass her family? I'm the man who paid for that wedding. I'm the man who bought you the house you're living in. What part of that is embarrassing?" He looked down, ashamed. "I know, Dad. I know what you did for us." But she was nervous, and her parents already thought the event was too small. I didn't want to start our marriage with an argument. I leaned forward, my voice firm but calm. "So you chose silence instead of standing up for the man who raised you? You let me stand outside like a stranger while you smiled for the cameras?" He didn't respond. His eyes glistened with tears he was too proud to shed. For a long moment, we just sat there. The father who gave everything, and the son who had everything, but didn't understand its worth. I stood up and walked toward the small wooden cabinet near the fireplace. Inside was an envelope I had prepared earlier that day. I handed it to him. "This is the deed to the house," I said. "You might want to look at it." He opened it, confusion spreading across his face. His name wasn't there anymore. "Dad, what did you do?" "I transferred the house back into my name yesterday," I said quietly. "You're welcome to stay there, but it's not yours anymore. Not until you understand what it means to earn something. Not until you understand what family means." His face went pale. "Dad, please. I didn't mean..." I held up my hand. "Ryan, listen to me. A father's job isn't just to provide. It's to teach his son the value of love and respect. I gave you everything you ever asked for, but maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I should have let you struggle. Maybe then you would have known the weight of gratitude." He looked crushed, tears falling now. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. I was just trying to keep the peace. I didn't want to ruin her day." "And you thought ruining mine was better?" I said softly. "You can rebuild a day, Ryan, but once you break someone's trust, it doesn't mend so easily." He wiped his face, but I could see he finally understood. He looked around the room again, the old clock, the chipped table, the photos of Martha, and his voice broke. "Mom would be so disappointed." I nodded slowly. "She would, but she'd also it's never too late to do what's right." Ryan stood and hugged me suddenly, holding on tight like he hadn't in years. "I'm sorry, Dad. I don't know how to fix it. You start by being honest, with yourself and with the person you married," I said. "And remember, love that asks you to be ashamed of your roots isn't love. It's control." He nodded, silent, tears streaking down his face. For the first time since that awful day, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the start of it. When he left that night, I didn't feel lighter, but I felt stronger. I knew I'd done what I needed to do, not out of anger, but out of love. Sometimes love isn't soft. Sometimes it's the weight that keeps a man standing when everything else has fallen apart. I watched him drive away, the same boy I once taught to hold a hammer and measure twice before cutting. I prayed that this time he'd learn how to measure his choices before letting the people who loved him most. Months passed after that night. The days moved slowly, like the ticking of an old clock that refused to stop. I went back to my usual routine, fixing small furniture jobs around the neighborhood, tending to my garden, and taking long evening walks by the lake. From the outside, everything seemed the same, but inside, something had changed. The house felt quieter, heavier. Every corner still carried echoes of Ryan's laughter as a boy. Every nail in the wall, every scratch on the floor reminded me of the life I had built for him. But now, it all felt distant, like a memory that belonged to someone else. I didn't hear from Ryan for a while. Weeks turned into months, and though part of me wanted to call, I didn't. I figured if I was the one who always reached out, he'd never learn to reach back. Sometimes love means stepping back and letting the other person find their own way, even if it hurts. I prayed every night for him and his new wife, hoping he'd learn what true family meant before it was too late. One quiet Sunday morning, I was sitting on the porch sipping coffee when I saw a car pull up. It was Ryan's. He stepped out slowly, wearing jeans and a worn-out t-shirt. His eyes looked tired, older somehow, like he'd aged years in just a few months. He walked up the steps, hesitated, then said softly, "Hey, Dad." I nodded, motioning for him to sit beside me. For a moment, we just listened to the wind moving through the trees. Then he spoke, voice shaky. "Olivia left." He stared down at his hands. "We fought a lot after the wedding. She said I wasn't ambitious enough, that I still thought too small. When I tried to talk about making things simpler, about just being happy, she said I was settling. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. She moved back with her parents last week," he continued. "I tried to make it work, Dad, I really did, but I think she wanted a different life." His words were heavy, but his eyes looked clearer than before. I sighed deeply. "I'm sorry, son. I know it hurts." He nodded, blinking away tears. "I thought doing everything her way would make her happy, but all it did was make me lose myself, and you." I looked at him for a long time, then said, "You can lose money, you can lose people, but if you lose yourself, you've lost everything. A marriage built on fear and pride can't last, son. You can't build love on conditions." He swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand that now. I should have defended you, Dad. You deserved better." His voice cracked. "You're the one person who's always been there for me, and I treated you like you were in the way." I felt tears gather in my eyes, but I held them back. "Ryan, love doesn't disappear because of mistakes. It bends, it breaks a little, but it can heal. What matters is what you do next." He looked at me, his expression filled with regret. "Can I ever fix this?" I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You already started by coming here." We sat in silence again, the quiet kind that isn't awkward, but peaceful. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft gold and orange. It reminded me of the evenings I used to sit out here with Martha. I could almost hear her laugh. I turned to Ryan and said, "You know, your mom always believed that every heartbreak is a lesson in disguise. Maybe this was yours." He nodded slowly. "I think she's right." He looked around, taking in the chipped porch railing, the creaking chair, the smell of the grass. "This house feels like home again," he said quietly. That night, we had dinner together for the first time in years. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, potatoes, and corn. We didn't talk much about the past. There was no need. The silence between us said enough. When he stood to leave, he hugged me longer than he ever had before. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered, "for everything." After he drove away, I stood on the porch, looking up at the stars. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally accepted what I couldn't control. I realized that love isn't about being repaid, it's about giving without expecting. Still, it was comforting to know that sometimes, even after the deepest hurt, love finds its way back home. The next morning, I went into my workshop and started building something new, a small wooden box. I carved a single word into it, legacy. Inside it, placed Martha's photo, the framed picture of me and Ryan, and a note that said, "Family is not who you live with, it's who lives inside your heart." I didn't build it one to see, I built it for myself, to remind me it was still alive in the lesson passed on. A few weeks later, Ryan began visiting more often. He helped me with repair around the house, cooked dinner on weekends, and sometimes we'd just sit on the porch talking about nothing at all. The bond wasn't what it used to be, it was something deeper now. Something rebuilt instead of obligation. I don't know what the future holds for him, but I know he's learned, and that's enough for me. A parent doesn't raise a perfect child. They raise a human being who learns through mistakes. I used to think my story ended the day I stood outside his wedding, but now I realize it was just the beginning of something new. An understanding that love is strongest when it survives the pain of being forgotten. So if you're a parent watching this, or maybe a son or daughter who's drifted away, take a moment and reach out. Say what needs to be said before silence becomes regret, because once a moment passes, it doesn't come back. Thank you for watching this story. Don't forget to subscribe to where you're watching. Tell me if this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone you love, because at the end of the day, every story like this reminds us we only have one family, and forgiveness is the only way to keep it.